Hey guys, this is GameCow. Welcome to another Pokemon Trading Card Game History video. We're almost there, just a couple more sets to go. We're into the DLC sets now though, with Twilight Masquerade, the Teal Mask set. Obviously featuring Ogerpon as a permanent thing here. We do have a non-EX of the Teal Mask one specifically, but honestly this card is really bad, just want to show it off because it's there. But we do have EXs for the four other forms of Ogerpon as well. And a lot of these are actually really good. I think there's only one that doesn't really see play per se, so it's actually kind of fun. The Ogerpon stuff ended up being a lot stronger than it initially looked, and that's always good. This set does have over 230 cards in total, but its impact is somewhat limited compared to some of them. What is good in here is kind of insane, and don't get me wrong, a lot of stuff in here does see play. This isn't a Vivid Voltage sort of set where it just doesn't really exist. You know, we're going to have one of those in Surging Sparks coming out, but this set does have a lot of good stuff. But the problem is that, again, it's kind of competing with all the busted stuff that we've already had. And so there are a couple of archetypes that come into the front here, but not everything is as good as you would maybe hope at this stage. One in particular that I'm not even going to try, unfortunately, that I love the concept of, but in practice it just doesn't work out, which is a shame. But we will get into that as we go, because I do have a lot of cards to speak on overall here, including the new sort of single prize gimmick archetype up here. Ogerpon itself does have a specific archetype they were trying to push, but it's not practical for reasons we'll get into in a sec. And then yeah, there's like 30 odd cards that are worth talking about for meta relevance, and almost as many which are back to the sort of draft or GLC, or you know, just off meta in general. It's once again, I want to say for draft it is really difficult at this point to work out if any of these would actually be draft viable, because it is so late in and we have had Paldean Fates, so it is very possible that somebody has just pulled Charizard and is invalidating a lot of the stuff that you would see down here. So I'm not convinced that everything down here would be viable for draft, but there's a lot of intriguing things that in a limited power format might still be very good, so we will see as we go. So let's talk about the Ogerpon thing first, because they are very relevant to the meta. It's just the Ogre's Mask thing really didn't work out. The idea was that you choose an Ogerpon EX in your discard pile and swap it with an Ogerpon EX that you have in play. It's just like all of the usual things here, that any turns in play, special conditions, damage counters, etc. all stay on the new Pokemon, and the idea was that you would switch between the forms to change type for whatever you needed at the time. The problem is energy costs. Yes, you have the Wellspring Ogerpon and the Cornerstone Ogerpon are relatively okay for type stuff, like you can use grass energy on these and it'd be perfectly fine. The Half-Flame one is the problem one child here though, because this specifically takes 3 fire energy to do its proper attack, and if your Ogerpon is surviving, Wrath or Half is like great, but they're all 210 HP. They're not likely to survive in this modern day. So its attack for, you know, colorless cost barely even matters, which is a shame. And then the real thing is that Teal Dance, which is the one that can accelerate energy, specifically accelerates grass energy, and so it doesn't really work with the typings on the other stuff. If the Half-Flame Ogerpon did not take triple fire, then I think this could have been reasonable, because we could have justified using Luminous Energy in this deck as well, instead of, like, if this was fire double colorless to do Dynamic Blaze, then we could have had Teal Dance being very good for accelerating energy, and then just using Luminous to pay for the cost of the other stuff. Unfortunately, not how it works, and in practice this just doesn't really do much of anything. So, yeah. However, the individually, at least all except the Half-Flame Ogerpon do actually see very significant amounts of play. So, we will talk about the Ogerpons individually, but as an archetype, this thing doesn't work, unfortunately. People really wanted it to, though. because Ogerpon is cute, you know, it's just a nice card to have. The other thing here is the Festival Lead archetype here. This revolves around the Festival Ground Stadium. This stadium doesn't really do a lot, it just removes special conditions if you have energy attached. Big deal, right? Special conditions aren't even that good, so who really cares? But all of these Pokemon here have the capability to use the Festival Grounds for something else. If Festival Grounds is in play, the Diplin, the Goldeen, and the Swirlix all get to use their attacks twice. If you KO the opponent with the first use of the attacks, then you get to choose to attack again after the opponent brings in a new Pokemon. This is relatively similar to stuff like the Medicham from before, you know, Omega Barrage as a trait, or the Jumpluff from I think it was Battle Styles? Or Evolving Skies, that sort of area, where it can attack twice as well. These attacks don't tend to do a ton for what it's worth. Like Whirlpool, if you flip heads, is pretty cool for discarding energy, but it takes 2 colorless to use, so good luck with that. Swirlix puts 2 damage counters down on one of the opponent's Pokemon, so you could get 4. That's like cute, but it's really not worth that much. Diplin is the one that you are trying to use here. Again, this is Wave 1 DLC, so this is before Hydrapple comes in, but Festival Lead allows you to use Do the Wave twice, so you can hit for 100 damage twice, 20 for each of your bench Pokemon. You would not be able to use the Area Zero Underdepths coming in Stellar Crown to boost the damage here, unfortunately, because you are not allowed to have both stadiums in play at the same time. So you are kind of locked at that 100 point. However, attacking twice, once again, is kind of a Charizard killer, so it could have been reasonable, right? It is weak to grass, you do 400 between the 2 hits, kinda neat. The problem is that it is only 80 HP, it only does 100 damage otherwise, so it's 200 capped elsewhere, it doesn't really do anything at that point. And the big thing with Festival Lead is that you are not able to use other attacks. You have to use the attacks that are printed on the cards, which means you cannot use a TM attack with the stuff here, which is a shame. So there's no using, say, Blindside or Crisis Punch or something like that to get multiple shots off, and that's where it sort of falls apart. The deck does have a Thwackey, which is ideal for searching cards out of the deck. If you have Festival Lead in your active spot, you can search your deck for any one card, put it into the hand. This is not a hard once per turn, so if you do get multiple Thwackey out, you would be able to get multiple cards with that. But one of the big issues with that is that the only attacker that's worthwhile is Diplin, and the only Diplin, there's no Applin that has Festival Lead. So it's like super limited in that aspect. The fact of these are both in grass typing though does actually help it a little bit, because it means that we would actually have access to some grass synergy that we will talk about in this set. But yeah, it's just like, this doesn't do enough. There are better things that we can use to knock out Charizard at this point. There are plenty of grass attackers that would be more viable, so yeah. Let's talk about the Pokemon from this set, because there are quite a lot of good ones. We'll start with the Ogerpons, because they are mostly early on in the deck stuff here. The Cornerstone Ogerpon has the ability to prevent itself from taking damage from other ability Pokemon, which is kind of cool, on the opponent's side specifically, of course. And its attack does 140 and is not affected by weakness, resistance, or any other effects on the opponent's active. I will say all of the Ogerpon attack for free energy is the main thing. So, fighting double colorless in this case. The Half-Flame Ogerpon has a fire double colorless attack that does 20 for each damage counter on it. As stated before, 210 HP is like an absolute bare minimum baseline that you're trying to hit at the moment, so don't expect this to survive, unfortunately. Dynamic Blaze is what you would look for here. For triple fire energy, it does 140 damage, but if the opponent's active is an evolution, you double that to 280 and then discard every energy on this Pokemon. It's a bit too expensive for the most part, but if you are playing like a Magma Basin heavy deck, you can consider it. It's just very difficult to charge up quickly enough, and the triple fire excludes it from any other deck whatsoever. If this was back in Gen 7 with Welder, then I think this would be ridiculous, but it isn't, and we don't have that kind of acceleration ever coming back at the moment, so I can't really see this card being that strong. The Wellspring Ogerpon, we'll talk about that one next. This one is really good for Bat's Caliber and a few other decks, like Lugia can often play this one too. Or Lost Fox even plays this, I think, at times. It has 2 attacks that are usable, 20 damage for 1 colorless energy and prevents the opponent retreating next turn. That actually can come up, especially because the decks it plays in often uses double turbo, so you could prevent the opponent retreating and not deal damage to them, which is kind of fun. But Torrential Pump is the thing that you actually use here. For a water and double colors, it does 100 damage, and you can shuffle 3 energy cards from this Pokemon back into your deck, and if you do, snipe 120 to the bench as well. Really powerful hit here, obviously with these all being terrestrial Pokemon and with Terra being more prominent as we go on, there are fewer targets that you can hit with this, but 120 snipe is still enough to KO like almost every evolution Pokemon before they get to be fully evolved, so that's really cool. And it just gets to do a lot of damage spread across the board. The obvious use here is in Bat's Caliber because you accelerate all the energy to it, then put the energy back in deck, and that's fine. You've got Chien-Pao that can get the energy to come back into hand, but Lugia will use it because of the special energy that is the A-Spec one that's in this set. So we'll get to that at the very end of the stuff here. Finally, the Teal Mask one. This is the one you'll see the most often, because this is the one that's generated a couple of brand new archetypes in this set. Teal Dance, for its ability here, allows you to accelerate a basic grass energy from the hand to itself, and if you do that, you draw a card. You have to draw a card, it is not optional, so it can be a bit awkward at the end of the game, but that's fine. For free grass energy, Myriad Leaf Shower does 30, plus 30 more for each energy on both active Pokemon. If a Charizard is capable of attacking, it dies to Myriad Leaf Shower because there's 5 energy between you, that's 180. With weakness, KOs the Charizard. That's kind of cool with the matchups that actually do play this, because you will often see this being able to accumulate enough energy over the course of a couple of turns to be able to attack. So, kind of good. This one really enables Regidrago and Raging Bolt to become meta decks at this point, and so we'll be showcasing those this time round as well. It's not its own attacker, but it's still very powerful because of those decks. I want to note that each of the Ogerpon are, of course, Terra types, because that's the whole gimmick with the mask, so they do not take bench damage, which is kind of good. They will still take damage counter placement, will be important in the future, but you don't take bench damage, and they all only have a single energy retreat cost as well. So, very mobile Pokemon. Rescue Board, or like Emergency Board, is really, really good at moving these guys. So, nice stuff. Blissey EX is a gigantic 300 HP EX, which is only a stage 1, and it has a couple of really good chances that you can evolve from, so that's always fun. Happy Switch allows you once per turn to move a basic energy from one of your Pokemon to another one. Very powerful effect, there's a lot of good stuff that you can do with that, as we'll see going forward. And Return for 3 colorless energy does 180 damage, and you may draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. It's not even mandatory, so you can't self-deck with this one either, which is pretty cool. Yeah, this attack is not the most powerful, but combined with the Monkey Dory that we will speak about in just a sec here, it can be very, very nasty, because this guy, Blissey survives, obviously, it's as it always does, right? It tanks a lot of damage, and it just gets to kind of do whatever it wants, more or less, right? You can use the Monkey Dory over here. If it has any Darkness energy attached to it, you can shift up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of the opponent's Pokemon. So 300 HP, really difficult to KO, right? And then you use the Happy Switch to move an energy from the Blissey to the Monkey Dory. That Darkness energy then lets you move damage counters around, and if you have a second Blissey, you just move the energy back, right? Or you can manual attach later on in the turn, do all sorts of fun stuff with that. Yeah, really nasty combination, but the problem is it gets hard countered by the Raging Bolt stuff, because if you one-shot Blissey, then there's nothing you can really do with it. It's kind of annoying. But Blissey does also have Charon's Care available to it at the moment as well, so you can do a ton of good recovery stuff with that as well. It's a very fun deck to play, if you are into the, like, denying the opponent knockouts sort of, you know, I'm never gonna die type fun, I guess. I want to note the Monkey Dory specifically because this gets played in quite a few different decks. Gardevoir is one obvious example, because you are putting damage counters on yourself the whole time in order to accelerate energy, so this allows you to do some intense math fixing with that. Surprisingly, Gouging Fire actually ends up using this too as a math fixer, because they have Magma Basin that damages themselves to accelerate energy, so that also kind of works as well. But yeah, there's a bunch of different stuff that you can potentially do with this as we go forward, so keep an eye on this card. It is really potent. Blood Moon Ursaluna is hands down the best card in this set. I don't think it's even that close, to be honest. This is a ridiculous 260 HP basic EX. Like, this is as big as some stage 1 EXs, which is unbelievable. And it's effectively Radiant Charizard 2.0. The season skill ability allows it to attack for 1 less energy for each prize card the opponent has taken. And for 5 colorless energy, Blood Moon does 240 damage and cannot attack in consecutive turns. So this is basically 10 less than Madzard, but it doesn't take a fire in its energy cost, so it can attack in any deck, potentially. If the opponent has only a single prize remaining, this will attack for 0 energy, but most of the time you're expecting it to attack for like 2 energy or something, realistically. But that's still unbelievable. 240 damage is enough to KO like all of the basic EXs that aren't Blood Moon Ursaluna, right? So that's kind of nuts. You have to like Bravery Charm to get around this thing, and it's just silly. The fact that we can prize manipulate as we go further in as well is just going to make this even more powerful. So basically, this feels like a better Wo-Chien for the Fortress deck if you want to look at it that way, but just about every deck could play this. It's ridiculous. Frostlass is an intriguing card. I don't know if Pepper's going to stick with the deck here, but combined with Greninja, there was something he was trying out. Maybe he'll keep playing it, I don't know. It's a 90 HP water type that is a single prizer, and during Pokemon Checkup, you put the damage counter on each Pokemon that has an ability except for any Frostlass. Unfortunately, it will damage the EX as well, so it's anti-synergy with itself, which is kind of lame. But yeah, this is used alongside Monkey Dory quite often actually, because Monkey Dory's ability means that it will take damage from this thing as you go forward, and then you get to move that damage to the opponent, and they're probably also taking damage, because a lot of the best mons in the game have abilities. So yeah, it's pretty silly. It does a lot, and that's always the fun thing. Luxray EX, just like the previous Luxray, unfortunately they've kind of made like the multi-prize Luxray's control cards, which is just really annoying. I like this Pokemon and I don't like the control decks, so whatever. It's a free 10 HP EX, so a bit on the frailer side for a stage 2, but it does only have 1 retreat. Kinda wish it was faster in the main games, right? And because they seem to give Luxray like 0 or 1 retreat all the time. Don't know why, whatever, doesn't matter. For 2 colorless energy, aka double turbo, Piercing Gaze does 120, and then the opponent reveals their hand and you get to discard any card you want from there. Very nasty, especially in the next set with 06 Machinations. We'll talk about that in Shrouded Fable, of course, but being able to limit the opponent's hand size already and then punch the best card out of their hand afterwards, kind of very mean. You know, it's just rude. Volstrike for 2 lightning does 250 and discards all energy from this Pokemon. Decent damage, but I don't think you even play lightning energy half the time in the control stuff, so you probably never see that attack. Greninja, the partner for the Frostlass thing, is a fighting terror, so it's like the opposite of the Garchomp from before, where this one's pure fighting type and uses water energy. This means you can't Irida Search this, but then with the Garchomp line you couldn't Irida Search the Gibbles and stuff, so kind of whatever, right? But anyway, free 10 HP, fighting type, allows you to do 170 damage for a single energy and searches your deck for any card to put into your hand as well. Kind of a busted attack, to be honest. Like, that is unbelievable efficiency and like hand fixing. It's just ridiculous, right? Unfortunately, the second attack is a little expensive, but it does do a lot for it, so I guess I can't complain too much. For water and the double colors energy, you discard 2 energy from the Pokemon and do 120 to 2 of the opponent's Pokemon. I think ideally you would have to play this with like a Bascalibur or something, and that might be getting a little bit too tricky at that stage. I think the deck that makes the most use of this card is Palkia, because you can use the one-time accelerant and basically do like a Moonlight Shuriken but slightly stronger, but also it's a fighting type that hits the Miraidon decks that will feast on the lightning weakness of Palkia, so that's kind of cool. And just being able to search your deck for any card that you need for the next turn, it's efficient. People were really hype on this card, it just didn't quite get there for the most part, but there's enough decks that play it that it's actually like worth talking about in its own right. It's pretty cool. I want to note the Dracloak here specifically because it's actually a really good evolving Pokemon for a decent deck in its own right. Dracloak's a 90 HP dragon type with the Recon Directive ability that allows you to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put one to the hand, put the other to the bottom of the deck. Basically, it's Pidgeotto even. Bird control is a thing again, only this time it's with a pair of dragons. Cool. Fortunately for us, like, bird control isn't really a thing this time round, because unfortunately there's like better control stuff to do, right? Why would we use this one when we have the big bird in Pidgeot? But this is really good for the Dragapult deck because it's added consistency, and it's always something that is worth noting. Dragapult itself is functionally a reprint of Dragapult VMAX, which, I mean, I'm happy with, but didn't quite pan out in its initial release. It's a 320 HP Terra Dragon type, and it does 70 damage for 1 colorless energy, or for a fire and a psychic energy, does 200 and then puts 6 damage counters across the opponent's bench in any way that you like. So this is damage counters, which means it gets around the Terra rule, because Terra only prevents damage done, not effects of attacks. But this does mean that Mist Energy will block the placement of the counters. So even though they don't like need the energy requirement for it, stuff like Charizard will often play Mist Energy just to prevent this from hitting the wrong target. So keep that in mind as you go through. Its damage is pretty efficient. It does do a reasonable amount. It only has a 1 retreat too, and it's not got a weakness because it's a dragon type, but it gets hard countered, I believe, by Regidrago. And like, obviously it gets hard walled by Blissey, but then Blissey gets beat by Raging Bolt. But then I think Raging Bolt actually beats this as well, so it's difficult to like justify it in the current format. The difficulty is the energy cost. Like, a fire and a psychic is just really tough to do turn 2, and if you don't attack with this on turn 2, you're often losing the game at that stage, because you're going to be set too far behind in tempo. That's just an unfortunate thing at the pace of the current format, but once that gets fixed though in future sets, it is a really powerful deck by itself. It is currently one of the better decks in Standard because of Stellar Crown's releases. So we'll get to that as we get to that set. But what I do want to note at the moment is that even if it's not the best deck by itself, it is still playable, and we probably still will see it because there's a few different variants you can play with this. It is very good in Regidrago and tends to be the main attacker in that deck. So it does still see play. It even sees play in Charizard because it is actually a strong attacker. It's just like, you've got to be able to charge it up. So yeah, it still sees a lot of play, but it's not as good in its own deck as you would expect right now. So don't expect to see too much of Recon Directive right now. Tatsugiri is ludicrous, but decks don't tend to play enough supporters for this to work right now, on average. If it's in the active spot, you can look at the top 6 cards of your deck, reveal a supporter card that you find there, and put it into your hand. It's a 70 HP Pokemon as well, so it is body often searchable, which is really good. And yeah, it's just a very powerful effect. But again, the catch is that a lot of decks only play maybe 7 or 8 supporters right now, and that's not a particularly good ratio for trying to hit this thing. So yeah, I would rather have Mew back in the format, obviously, because that card was cool, but Supporter Search is really, really powerful, so keep an eye on this. Some decks do play it, but we just may not see it in our builds because we might not take a deck list that has it. The most controversial card in this set has got to be Iron Thorns EX. This is a 230 HP Lightning type future EX, and it has the initialization attack ability. It's not even an attack, that's Volt Cyclone. As long as this Pokemon's in the active spot, Rule Box Pokemon in play have no abilities except for future Pokemon. Gross. So, obviously it works on your own stuff too, but the deck is literally just 4 Iron Thorns and that is it, which is really dumb. Maybe there's a Cornerstone Ogerpon or something in there, but when it's not in the active spot it doesn't stop the ability, so blah, right? Its attack for a Lightning and Double Colorless does 140 and moves an energy from this Pokemon to the bench. That is a mandatory move, but you probably don't care too much about that because it means that you can use recovery cards on this much more readily. And yeah, this is controversial because it won Worlds, but it only won Worlds more or less on a technicality. Like, again, no shade on the skill of the player. It was more just that he definitively lost his top 8, and then infamously Ian Robb made a bit of a gesture that wasn't very sporting. He got retroactively forfeited from that game, and then Iron Thorns goes to win the entire tournament, which is just kind of gross, to be honest. Yeah, I really hate this sort of deck. The whole, like, it goes right back to the Quad Muck EX deck that Matt played in the Gen 3 stuff, and it's just a horrific experience to play against this sort of thing. And it's just good enough that a lot of that quite a lot of decks actually do fall to this, right? So yeah, I do not care for this thing whatsoever. I don't think we're going to see it because realistically nobody wants to play this. I think if its intended purpose was probably to be part of the Future Box deck like I played before, and in there it would probably be good, and it would be like okay. It's sort of like Fluttermane in that aspect, but it's just, that's not how it panned out, and that just makes it really disgusting, and I don't like it. Iron Leaves is a single prize one this time, 120 HP, and it's got a couple of decent attacks. Recovery Net for a single Grass Energy puts up to 2 Pokemon when you discard pile into the hand. That's respectable recovery stuff. Some, I believe, again, more control-based decks might want to use that sort of thing. It is on an attack, which is a bit unfortunate for the speed aspect of it, but like, this is fine. Virizian's done this sort of thing before, and it's been, like, okay, right? Avenging Edge is what we actually want to look at, though. For a Grass and Double Colorless, it does 100 damage, but if any of your Pokemon were KO'd by damage last turn from your opponent's attacks, then you get to do 60 more damage. It's not quite there by itself, because it is 10 damage short of KO and Charizard, but this is a future Pokemon. We do have the damage augments that we can use on that, and so it's actually perfectly reasonable to expect that this will be able to kill Charizard in matchup stuff. And because it does have a Double Colorless in its cost, this can be a toolbox type thing as well. In future, we do have the acceleration of Miraidon that's pretty good for stuff here, but also this can be like a Lost Box card, because they could just put a Grass Energy in at some point, right? Even stuff like Giratina could play this to good effect, so decent enough card to have for the Charizard matchup. As far as the trainers go, you can see there's a lot of A-Specs here. It's one of my biggest complaints, I think, at the moment, is that, like, the A-Specs are all one per deck, right? You can't play any more than one A-Spec in your deck, but, like, they print 6 to 8 of them in every single set, and it's just like, why? You know? Most of these are never going to see, like, actual... Some of them, like, they do see play, but they're so sparse even, so fleeting, it's just weird. Anyway, Accompanying Flute is, like, my most hated card out of this set. Maybe outside of Iron Thorns, but like this card is stupid as well. Why do they keep giving control of these sorts of tools? Reveal the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck, choose any number of basic Pokemon you find there and put them onto the bench. So we already had Erica's Invitation, which was the supporter that like looked at the opponent's hand, dumped a basic from the hand onto the bench and then forced it to the active slot. And like, we do not need to keep giving Snorlax these kinds of tools. Now there's like nowhere that's safe, right? Because if you have to basically try and discard the Pokemon as quickly as you can, and it's nasty. I hate it. It's like, why do they keep doing this, you know? Now it's just like, oh, it's easy to trap something in the active because Snorlax is just like really dumb. Bug Catching set is really cool for the grass decks here. You look at the top 7 cards of your deck and reveal 2 in combination of grass Pokemon and basic grass energy to put into the hand. This works with evolutions too, so keep an eye on this for Torterra potentially. Like next set, Torterra's got a very fun deck that it can play, so it's pretty good for that. But obviously the idea is to use this with the Ogerpon stuff. If you're building an Ogerpon centric deck, you could use this to find the Teal Mask Ogerpon and like a grass energy to go with it and get a ton of acceleration and a ton of good stuff and play with that. Enhanced Hammer makes a return. We did lose Fan of Waves in the previous rotation, but Enhanced Hammer is just a better version of it anyway. Quite a lot of decks will tech this in as an anti-Lugia thing, especially because of the special energy that it plays from this set. Very good card, just gotta find a space for it, I guess. As a good Arven target though, it's a pretty solid thing to have around. The Thursday spec that I want to talk about is Hyper Aroma. This is one I'm going to be trying in Gardevoir this time round. You search your deck for up to 3 Stage 1 Pokemon, reveal them, put them into the hand. Obviously, if you have established a set of routes in the previous turn, then you can Hyper Aroma and search out all of the Curlier in one go, and just get everything rolling. It is super cool. Alternatively, I guess you could use this in something like Dragapult as well if you want to. I think you could use this in Charizard too if you build enough Stage 1s into the list. So there's like a lot of versatile uses for this. The big catch is that it is taking up your A-Spec slot, and if you don't get enough basics down initially, you don't get to evolve them all. So it really depends on if you can get your basics searched down first. And sometimes you might not even need this because of like TM Evo or something like that. So it's more of a redundancy plan, but like the almost guaranteed setup is really, really strong here. So I'm a little bit all over the place today. I don't know what's up with that. Scoop Up Cyclone returns from Generation 5. It just puts one of your Pokemon and all cards attached to it into the hand. My initial Regidrago list did play this, but I've switched it for Pinecatcher because I think it's a little bit better overall, so we won't really be seeing this one this time. But Scoop Up Cyclone is a really fun card. It gets to be used in wherever you want, really, and yeah, it's just neat. I like the effect, so we may see this at some point. Again, like that's the thing with all of these A-Specs, we may see it, but there's so many of them that we might just not get a chance to. It's kind of annoying. Secret Box we definitely will see, however, because the Gouging Fire deck plays this one. This is an absolutely busted card that is very expensive to play. You have to discard 3 cards in order to play this card. But then you search your deck for 4, so it kind of breaks even, but the cards you search are like every type of trainer card. 1 item, 1 tool, 1 supporter, and 1 stadium. Very, very nasty, because you guarantee your supporter search. You've got the Stadium card, which is really good for Gouging Fire, because Magma Basin. You have the Tool card, which is Bravery Charm or Forest Sealstone most of the time, but any specific tool that you have would be very powerful here. And you also get an item, so you could get a Nest Ball, or if you're a setup deck like Gardevoir, you could get Body Poffin, and just be like, wow, I'm getting everything here, right? Very good for the evolving decks as well, actually, because you get to search TM Evo at that time as well. So yeah, big fan of this card. It's just discard 3 can be very difficult to manage. Unfair Stamp is another one that's like almost too good, I would say. If you can only use this if one of your Pokemon was knocked out in the opponent's last turn, but you both Shuffle Draw, and that's already kind of scary. But unlike Iono, you get 5 cards every time The opponent only ever gets 2. This is like Super Roxanne, basically, where you don't have to use your supporter slot. You always get to use this even if the opponent's only taken a single prize, and yeah, no kidding, like a lot of Stage 2 decks love this card. This one competes with Prime Catcher and possibly Hyper Aroma or Secret Box, depending on what you want to do that way. Very many God of War decks will play on first tap, and like it is a super big consideration for me, but I want to try the Aroma. That's basically what it comes down to. Carmine initially looks kind of weak. It's a discard your hand and draw 5 cards. We already have research, so you think, why would we play this? Well, you get to use it on your first turn going first. And that gives Lugia in particular a very nice speed bump that they didn't have before. Because this means you can now more readily use Luminion and be able to try and search your, or like get your Archeops and stuff in the discard right from turn 1. Very interesting card, but also think it could be good in draft, just as like an extra speed boost sort of thing. Maybe better in draft than it is in the real game. I don't know, but it's just neat to have an extra supporter going first. Kieran is one of the interesting choose one type cards here. You either get to play it as a switch, or you get to do 30 more damage to the opponent's active EX or Pokemon V that they have in play. So this is one of the only like 2 ways of increasing damage to Pokemon EX at the moment. The other one being the A-Spec Maximum Belt, so you don't often see that one. Yeah, this card's really cool. The modal aspect of it does allow it to see play in a few different decks, and it is a supporter-based card that allows you to switch, which is very strong against control, because the Snorlax will often have Airy as part of their deck, so they get to rip your item cards away, and so Switch itself or Switch card might not be that safe, but the supporter card's a lot harder to get rid of, and so this could be really good against them. Lana's Aid is an interesting card as well. This puts 3 in any combination of non-Warbox Pokemon and basic energy cards from your discard pile into your hand. So it doesn't work on EXs, it doesn't work on Vs, but this is a slightly changed version of Clara, and Clara did see a bunch of play. This could be really strong in evolving decks. Like, you know, potentially your Charizard, potentially your Dragapult, you know, God of War, blah blah blah. Very good in God of War in particular, actually. I don't think any of them end up making the space for it, but considering God of War now uses like non-EX attackers more or less exclusively, this would be really good at just instantly picking them back up. Could be worth considering, actually. I just don't know how I would fit it into my 60, but yeah, cool card. Jamming Tower is a very important new stadium card that prevents Pokemon tools from having any effect. Most notable in Regidrago this current set, because it can deal with Bravery Charms that otherwise give that deck quite a bit of trouble. But any deck that relies on a tool card to work, this can be a pretty good stopgap against them. So it's one that's worth keeping in mind. Handheld Fan is another one of those control cards that I think sees a little bit of play. I'm pretty sure I've seen this in like Pidgeot control at some point, so we'll put it here anyway. If it's on the active Pokemon and that Pokemon takes damage from the opponent's attack, you get to move an energy from the attacker to one of the opponent's bench Pokemon. It's fine. I don't think it's the most powerful effect out there, but energy disruption, and sometimes in that particular fashion, is very irritating, so it can come up with points here. Survival Brace is another A-Spec. This is a tool card this time round, and it is Focus Sash, like it should have been, not just locked to fighting types. If the Pokemon this is attached to was at full HP and would be KO'd by damage from the opponent's Pokemon, you don't get KO'd, it becomes a 10 HP remaining Pokemon instead, and you discard the Survival Brace. Simple enough. It's just because it's an A-Spec, it has a hard time competing against a lot of stuff here. I think it might be a little bit too strong at the current point if it wasn't an A-Spec, but still a bit of an annoyance, right? Boomerang Energy is an interesting card. This is potentially like seeing consideration in the new Slacking deck from Surging Sparks. It provides a colorless energy, but if it gets discarded by the effect of an attack that's used on the Pokemon it's attached to, it goes back onto the Pokemon rather than getting discarded. So that's kind of cool. Not a lot of Pokemon right now that are used have this kind of thing going for them, and I think the problem is that it has to be used specifically by the Pokemon it's attached to. Raging Bolt would have been a great target for discarding with this, but unfortunately that means the Raging Bolt itself has to be the attacking thing, right? Like the one that it's attached to has to be attacking, and this doesn't pay for Raging Bolt's attack. So, bit of a shame, but keep an eye on it, because any time that like discard 2 energy or something comes up, this has got a chance to see play. The fire specific one did see limited play in Generation 6, so it's always worth looking at. Finally, there is the most important energy in this set, Legacy Energy. This A-Spec is a rainbow energy that when the Pokemon it's attached to gets KO'd, the opponent takes 1 less prize for KOing it. It is a hard once per game effect on this, so even if you recover Legacy Energy, it will not allow you to do this more than once. But of course, this is a humongous power boost for Lugia, because now Lugia has a Rainbow Energy back in its acceleration pool. So you can play Iron Hands much more easily here, and that Iron Hands only gives up 1 prize too. It's kind of gross. So this is the big reason Enhanced Hammer gets teched, because Enhanced Hammer removing Legacy Energy to keep the prize map in order is very important. So, with the meta cards taken care of, let's have a look at what the rest of the set has to offer. Once again, I do need to stress the fact that Draft is so far in at this point that speculating on what is and isn't good is very difficult to do, but even if these cards don't end up being good for Draft, or if they're better for the main game, they're just not like meta-relevant decks or anything, it's still worth talking about them, because there's a lot of fun stuff that would go missed if we did not. Starting with Pheasantipity. This is a 120 HP Psychic type Pokemon. It is a single prizer, which is kind of good for it, and if it has any Darkness Energy attached to it and takes damage from any attack, yours or the opponent's, you nullify that damage on a heads flip. Super irritating card overall. We've seen this kind of effect come up quite often, usually on stuff like Jumpluff, and yeah, it's always a pain in the butt when it actually shows its face. The attack is where it sort of falls apart though. For 1 Psychic Energy, it does 30 damage for each energy that's attached to this Pokemon. The knee-jerk reaction is to put this in Gardevoir, and maybe in Draft it could be okay for that, but the problem is that 120 HP is not enough. You probably need to play this alongside the Monkey Dory in order to shift damage counters away from it and get more energy attached, but then you have to have multiple Darkness Energy in play, and it just doesn't really seem like that's going to be feasible, because otherwise the base HP total here caps you at like 180 damage, 5 energy attached from Gardevoir plus the darkness that you would have on you. That's fine, like it's not awful, but Gardevoir can already do that for less effort on other Pokemon, and the only thing this brings is a 50% chance to dodge an attack. Don't get me wrong, if you get that flip you might well win a game, but I still wouldn't put faith in it that much. Okidogi, I think, actually sees a little bit of rogue play at the moment. Like, there's a couple of funny decks that can play it. It's a 130 HP fighting type Pokemon, which is different from the Monkey Dory and the Pheasantipity, obviously. It's not, it doesn't actually have a psychic base type it can use. It's got the Adrena Power ability as its one. If it has a Darkness Energy attached to it, it gains 100 extra HP and does 100 more damage to the opponent's active, which sounds busted, and I mean, don't get me wrong, a 230 HP single prizer is really strong, but Good Punch for 2 fighting energy only does 70 damage. So first off, this probably needs a Luminous Energy so that you don't attach free in order to get it to work, but then second off, it does 170 damage for that 2 energy. Is pretty reasonable, but it's so much effort to get a fighting and a luminous on this thing that Yeah, in basic stuff, that is definitely not worth it. In draft, the fact of it is a basic, and it does survive most of the lower power hits is probably good, and it is a fighting type, so the weakness is nice. There's like a tiny chance for it. I'm not convinced, but maybe in the future with some of the other stuff that comes out to boost the power of this, it might make it worth it. I don't know. It is a fighting type, so like you've got 3 different things you hit for weakness. Bravery Charm is obviously good too, 280 HP at that point. Like it's certainly possible, but I'm just not convinced without actually trying it out, you know? Sinistra is fun, but only 70 HP, so not amazing. It has Curse Drop is like kind of whatever, 4 damage counters. That would be fine on a basic, but on a stage 1 with this HP, no thank you. But Spill the Tea is like kind of cool with the Ogerpon stuff. For a single grass energy, you do 70 damage for each grass energy that you discard across your board. It caps at 210. But like that's still fine, right? You can discard up to 3 from like 1 from itself, 1 from the Ogerpons you've been accelerating. Then like yeah, 210 in damage for a single prize, kind of okay. But it's on the stage 1, so good luck with that, right? It has an EX as well, but it only has 240 HP, which is kind of ridiculous to be honest. But it does at least synergize with the whole discarding energy thing from the base form. For a single colorless, this one puts 2 damage counters on one of the opponent's Pokemon for each basic grass energy in your discard pile. It then shuffles those back into the deck. It's very much the Riptide sort of thing, or the Powerful Storm sort of stuff that we've seen before, but this one does damage counter sniping instead. This means it can't hit for weakness, but it also means it can hit Terra Pokemon on the bench, which is pretty fun. But once again, 240 HP stage 1 EX, the Poltergeist has only got like 30 HP as well. Even if it can block bench damage on itself, that's still not very good, so it's tough to justify, really. Clefable is pretty cool. For 2 colorless energy, this thing's got Metronome, so it copies one of the opponent's active's attacks, so it's very much like the Mew EX, but for 1 less energy. That's pretty good. There's a lot of good attacks that you could copy this way, and there was a Clefable EX at some point. I forget exactly what it does. I think it's like gives you psychic energy laden Pokemon 0 retreat or something. So like if you have a bunch attached, you can retreat for free. And like again, potential God of War stuff, right? Being able to steal the opponent's attack is pretty powerful, and yeah, it's not too bad. Hisuian Arcanine is one that synergizes with self-damage type stuff here. It's a 130 HP stage 1 single prizer that for no energy will do 30 plus 90 damage if your bench Pokemon have got any damage counters on them whatsoever. So there is actually a good synergy with the Emolga from this set, which is a 60 HP single prizer with 0 retreat, so a decent early game pivot too. And Skywave does 10 damage plus 10 to every benched Pokemon that's in play. So it will damage the Arcanine, blah blah, who cares. Point is, it means that your bench mons have got damage counters on them, and so Proud Fangs will do 120 damage for no energy. It's in fighting, that's the main reason to look at it, because again, decent weakness, and yeah, I mean, Steelix does a lot of damage and then self-damages and stuff, so there's plenty of different things you can use for this. And there's maybe one other card that we can talk about that has some damage counter synergy in the Aggron. So this is a 180 HP stage 2. It is a metal type, so it would work with the Steelix here. And that's kind of where I'm going with this one. For a single metal energy, Angry Slam does 50 for each of your Pokemon in play that has any damage counters on them. So, if you use this with Emolga or Steelix, you can put damage counters on each one of your Pokemon in play, and then this can do 250, 300 damage, just like Hisuian Zoroark V-Star did. It's pretty alright. It's on the stage 2 though, so again, this is a lot of setup to make work, but you don't have to play very many energy. So you could probably make deck space by, like, Steelix takes 1 energy, the Emolga takes 1 energy, this takes 1 energy, right? So you only ever need 1 attachment at a time. So like it could work. Oh, it's worth thinking about. Abra, I think, is a little bit of a control-esque thing. I don't believe there's any decks that have talked with this yet, but or like made like limitless results and whatnot. But if it's in the active slot, you just get to shuffle it and all cards attached to it back into the deck. So when we lose Pidgeot V, there is the potential for this to be like a replacement sort of thing. This would prevent you from decking out, is the main reason to use it. So yeah. The Alakazam from this set is also like kind of cool. Strange hacking for 1 psychic energy confuses the opponent's active and then shifts the damage counters that's on the opponent's Pokemon around in any way that you want. So if you've been able to accumulate a decent amount of damage across their board, just like the old Tapu Lele and whatnot, you can use the attack to like KO whatever you want. And also leaving the opponent confused is cool. If you have the Alakazam EX from 151, maybe it's okay. Its attack is like not amazing though, so I'm not really super in love with it. Farfetch'd is kinda cool as an early game thing. It's a 70 HP Pokemon, so it works with Buddy Poffin, and when you... although you probably don't want to Buddy Poffin it because then you don't get the ability. If you play it from hand to bench, you can search your deck for a Pokemon tool and attach it to this Pokemon. The goal would be to be able to attach like an Evo TM and then use Jet Energy to bring this into the active and use the Evo TM straight away. I don't know how feasible that actually is, but like it's still kind of neat. Mark Cut is also reasonable. 1 energy, 30 damage, discard a special energy for the opponent's active. Special energy might not be as prominent in draft as they are otherwise, but again, jet energies and stuff like that could be very powerful, so there's a chance for it to be usable for that attack as well. Leafeon is interesting, not for this set, but because in Stellar Crown there's the Eevee that can evolve if you have it in the active slot, even if it shouldn't be able to evolve that turn. It's a single grass energy for its attack here that attaches a basic grass from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon, and if you do, fully heal that Pokemon. So it's jet energy compatible as well, which is pretty useful. So like you could jet this into the active and then evolve the Eevee to this thing and full heal one of your Pokemon on bench. It's a lot of hand setup, but again, like a full heal is pretty respectable. So like Arboliver was doing that as an ability, but it was a stage 2. This is potentially playable if the evolution stuff actually ends up being good. So keep it in mind, I guess. Ariados is the second Spooter that gives the opponent's active extra retreat. Unfortunately, this one only works on evolution Pokemon, so you don't play very many of this in the Spidops deck. It's a very funny deck though. I don't think it's very viable for draft because Spidops EX is what you need, and that is not easy to pull very many of, but it does exactly the same thing as Spidops, just with less damage, right? 10 plus 30 for each colorless in the opponent's active's retreat cost. Not really going to get there, to be honest, but remember Spidops is like 90 plus 30, so that's a bit more reasonable, right? Yeah, this just works to give, you know, Charizards, Gardevoirs, that sort of stuff extra retreat, if you need another set to do that. Farigiraf has got probably the funniest attack name in the set, the Wonderful Rumble. I think this was like initially literal translated as like mid-rumble or something, which was very hilarious. For 2 colors energy, it does 40 for each of your stage 1 Pokemon in play. The obvious idea to do with this is Hyper Aroma. I think you use this with Xatu would be the obvious one to accelerate some energy to it. You could maybe do 200, 240 damage or something if you can get a full set of stage 1s. I don't think the stage 1s are strong enough to really do that, unfortunately, but it's a fun card nonetheless, so yeah. Then we have Volbeats, which I think actually could genuinely see play in draft stuff regardless of power level here. It's a 70 HP grass Pokemon. It has only colorless in its attack costs, and so it's Body Poffin searchable. It can use Jet Energy, and if you go first, you get to use the Quick Sign on your first turn to search your deck for any 2 basic Pokemon and bench them. So incredibly powerful setup potential here as well. It does have an attack that works with Illumise being on your bench, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't think the Illumise is very good. We'll talk about it anyway, but it's really only here because of Slowing Perfume. If you go second and it's your first turn, you get to shuffle one of the opponent's bench Pokemon and all cards attached back into the deck. Kinda gross, but again, like, only on one turn, and then you have to have this in play for Volbeat to do 80 damage for 2 energy. No. But both of them are Poffin searchable, which is pretty cool. And again, Quick Sign allowing you to get like the EXs and stuff maybe as well, or bigger Pokemon that Buddy Poffin can't get. Super cool card. So I think this actually has some chance to see play in draft, even this late in. Being able to search out basics when you go first is super underrated. Infernape is probably good for draft. It is a stage 2, but it does accelerate energy, so that's kind of cool. You can attach a basic fire or fighting or both to your Pokemon in any way that you like. The energy has to come from hand, which is the only bad bit about it, but energy retrieval is evergreen in our prospective rule set, so you will always have access to at least retrieval to get the stuff. And yeah, double energy acceleration, especially with a fighting and fire, both of which are kind of hard to accelerate right now, not too bad. Its attack is also pretty strong if there aren't a ton of EXs in the opponent's deck. For 2 fire and a colorless, it does 200 and discards an energy from this Pokemon. It's a bit frail at 140 HP, but like, it's decent energy acceleration. It's quite a mobile Pokemon as well. Infernape does tend to have very low retreat costs, and yeah, it's not bad. It's just, you gotta have the energy in hand, and I think that's the bit that kind of killed the Dragonite from Gen 7 as well, is like it had to be hand acceleration, but this is still respectable and worth a note. Double energy acceleration is always strong, right? Heatran would be the biggest partner for the Metang in the previous set if you are lucky enough to pull like a playset of them. It's 140 HP single prizer, so pretty beefy. If it's in the active spot and takes damage from the opponent's Pokemon, it auto burns them, so they'll take at least 20 damage in recoil, which is pretty good. And Steel Burst for a metal double colorless discards all the metal from this Pokemon, does 50 damage for each one you discarded this one in this fashion. So this will require you to have like multiple Super Rod probably in order to put the stuff back into the deck, but with the intense energy acceleration that the Metang lists are capable of putting out, this can hit one-shot numbers in a single turn. It is very self-destructive, but considering what you are looking at playing, it's a basic Pokemon to work with the stage 1s. By the way, Metang is another deck that Hyper Aroma could be very good for. And like, this card is just cool, right? There's a lot that is potentially going for it. The 50 multiplier is a little bit weak nowadays, considering 70 is quite often seen, but it's just about good enough considering it gives up a single prize. Conkeldurr, I think, is much more of a potential rogue deck than it is a draft deck, but if you are affected by a special condition, this 180 HP stage 2 does not have to pay for Gutsy Swing, which does 250 damage as a fighting type. Very nasty card. The problem, of course, is getting the special condition on yourself, and the only way in draft that's like good to do that is to play what's his face, Brute Bonnet with the Ancient Booster Capsule, and that is not an easy combo to pull, so it's unlikely that this would be playable in draft, but if you've got it, cool idea at least. Morpeko's an interesting one. This has the very Sableye Excavate style ability of Snack Seek, where once per turn you get to look at the top card of your deck and you can choose to discard that card if you want to. It's also energy acceleration, which could be useful. For a single lightning energy, you attach up to 2 basic energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way that you like. So this could be an early game pick in draft as well. You just need to have a way of getting a lot of energy in the discard, and you know, that's always possible. Palafin has an EX form that I love, and a basic form that you have to use in order to bring it out. And unfortunately that's just too clunky, but I love this nonetheless. Palafin's 0 to Hero ability allows you to, when this Pokemon moves from the active spot to the bench, search your deck for a Palafin EX and swap it with this Pokemon. It's basically the only way that you're allowed to play Palafin EX, even using like revival type stuff would not work on this. Like Rabska could not put this into play, which is a shame. Palafin EX itself is a ridiculous 340 HP stage 1 EX that for 1 energy does 250 damage. Can't attack in consecutive turns, but who the heck even cares? That is just unbelievable amounts of damage for the efficiency stuff here. But it's so hard to set up, right? You need to have the regular non-EX Palafin, which then needs to move from active to bench, so then you switch it to this Palafin, that then needs to switch back into the active to do its effect. It's just so much effort, and it's very, very hard to search the evolution out here. And the other catch is that it has to be from deck. This is not like hand, deck, or graveyard, right? Which is what it would be in Yu-Gi-Oh! This specifically has to be from the deck, and that means if you draw the Palafin EX, then you do not get to play the game. And that is really sad. So yeah, there's far too many hoops for this to go through, but I still think it would be very fun if you could somehow do this in draft. I think we would have to have a separate like mini rule for this one, where effectively the regular Palafin is treated as a pre-evolution. If you pull the EX, it is not guaranteed that you're going to pull the regular Palafin, right? But you have to have this Palafin to play the EX. So I think this would be like a mini pre-evolution rule. Where if you pull, say, 3 EX Palafin, you're allowed to play up to 3 of the regular one as well. Revavroom is interesting because of the draw engine Revavroom that we had before. Rally Back for a single colorless energy does 30 plus 90 if one of your Pokemon was KO'd by damage during the opponent's last turn. So 120 damage for a single energy. These sorts of attacks are always worth noting because they can be very powerful in the right circumstance. Their damage numbers have certainly decreased a lot in recent times. Like 120 used to, I mean, it used to be 90 in Gens 5 and 6, and that was very powerful, but 120 just doesn't hit the same, unfortunately. So it isn't as good as previous forms of it, but it's still worth noting because if you're playing Revavroom anyway, you might play this as an additional revenge attacker or something, right? So yeah. Ting-Lu, I think, is a really fun card. I don't think it's necessarily good enough considering the Terra emphasis, but in draft, if there are less Terra Pokemon going around, Ground Crusher is kind of nuts. This is a 140 HP basic fighting type Pokemon that does 30 damage for a single fighting energy. If there's a stadium in play, you discard that stadium and do 30 to each of the opponent's benched Pokemon as well. That's a really large amount of spread damage for a single energy, and it discards the stadium, so you can use this with Artisan or something to get another basic in play yourself and deny the opponent the chance to get their basic in play as well. I think this card is really cool. I just know that in Standard it definitely doesn't have a chance to see play because there's too much Terra stuff that just doesn't care, and it's probably just a bit too slow for Standard. But like, again, depending on power level, I think it could be really good in draft formats. Then there is Walking Wake as our final Pokemon here. This has a very similar attack to Banette and Frostlass and like Spiteful sort of things that we've seen before. It's a 130 HP single prize ancient water Pokemon that for 2 water and a colorless energy puts up to 9 damage counters on itself and does 20 for each damage counter placed in this way. We've seen this exact attack, but usually it's like 7 damage counters, but we've seen this exact attack come up before. It has actually been competitively relevant in the past, but the difference is that it was a 1 energy stage 1 attack, whereas this is a 3 energy basic attack, and water doesn't really synergize at all with the stuff that ancient Pokemon tend to do, so not amazing. But if you desperately need a water attacker in your ancient box, you can't really do any better than this because there aren't any other ones to choose from. Finally, there's 3 supporters that I want to talk about here. Hassel, I have actually seen played in 1 deck exactly in Rogue Tier stuff. It was a Frostlass Monkey Dory deck that was like kind of not great, so I don't really count that as the main thing. If one of your Pokemon was KO'd during the opponent's last turn, this supporter card looks at the top 8 cards of your deck, puts up to 3 of them into the hand, and shuffles the rest back into the deck. It's much more restricted Misty's Determination, but it does give you more cards. So it could be good. 8 is a pretty deep number to search into the deck, so that's kind of cool. But the knockout restriction is just really bad. At that point, like, I think there's other stuff that you could do which would be much better. Lucian, I really hope we never have to play. This is hand disruption, but like, we should never have to play this. But I want to note it anyway because it's dumb. Each player shuffles the hand into you know, and puts it onto the bottom of the deck, so it's like, I don't know. And then if either player puts the card to the bottom of the deck, you flip a coin. Both players flip coins, and if they flip heads, they draw 6. If they flip tails, they draw 3. So it's like Galactic Wager sort of thing, but much, much more annoying. Yeah, we have much better hand disruption available in Judge and like 2 printings of Iono, so hopefully we never have to play something like this, but I don't know, if somebody is absolutely desperate they could consider this card. And then the last one to talk about under kind of similar circumstances, to be honest, is Perrin. This is double Pokemon communication on a supporter card. Reveal up to 2 cards, Pokemon cards specifically, in your hand. Put them into the deck. If you do, search your deck for up to that many Pokemon and put them into the hand. So it's a 2 for 2. This is one way of getting evolution Pokemon out, which is notoriously kind of difficult to do. And it doesn't have to just be evolution Pokemon, so you could use this in place of Jacques if you have like a high enough density of Pokemon. But my major problem with this is that most of the Mon search in this format is either Ultra Ball, which already gets you an evolution and is just better than this, or directly benches the Pokemon. Like, Nest Ball doesn't work with the option of having this, and Body Poffin also auto benches. So, like, nothing really works with this. This kind of, like, Pokemon communication was pretty good in the past with stuff like Level Ball or Quick Ball, or like whatever, right, in order to be able to add the cards to the hand and then put them back into the deck to get whatever like you want that particular ball search couldn't do. This, in theory, would be nice to do the same thing, but in practice just can't do that because we don't get to put the Pokemon into the hand as often as we used to. And the ones that we do get to put into hand are the ones that we will want to search with this anyway. So it just, like, it's incompatible. Not to mention it is just a straight -1 anyway on the supporter card. It's just like, we have better ways of searching Pokemon than this. However, it is the kind of card that I could actually see being played in Draft if you are trying to do something very specific that we just don't have access to otherwise. I don't know. Who really knows at this point, but, like, it's just worth noting that we have another Mon Search-esque thing in here. Because, who knows, maybe that could just be the missing link for whatever deck that you want to play. This set is definitely intriguing. Like I said, there's actually a surprisingly decent number of meta-relevant cards here, and we do see some new archetypes come out of this, so I won't say this was like a dead set or anything, but I don't know, it's intriguing. Like, this is one of the better ones. Definitely better than the next couple of sets that come out in terms of mainline sets, but I don't know, maybe I'm still just a little disappointed on the stuff here with it. It doesn't feel like it does as much as I think the game needs at this stage, because we're still seeing top tier archetypes that are like over 2 years old at this point, right? And they're just like, maybe they're just hanging on because of rotation not coming just yet, but oh man, there's a lot of old decks that just like need to die at this point. I think it's been so long that they're just like beating everything that we get released. It's kind of sad. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you have enjoyed this extended look at Twilight Masquerade. And until next time, when we do our battle video for this, we've got a few pretty interesting decks, I think, lined up for this one. So, should be quite fun. Till then, take care.